Welcome back to the Technocracy News Hour. We're talking today with Mr. Carl Teichrib from Canada. He's a researcher, a writer, an author. He's a frequent speaker at conferences, and he's an expert on things relating to the United Nations, to globalization, to religious globalization, and other things. I am Patrick Wood, your host for this hour, and Carl, thank you for coming on today and sharing your knowledge with us.
My friend, it's good to be on your podcast. Thank you for inviting me.
Indeed. And we agreed already that we wanted to talk today about the religious aspects of globalization today. And the context of this within the United Nations, the context of the United Nations, that is, we have the movement towards sustainable development. We have essentially war having been declared on capitalism and free enterprise. The United Nations has been very clear that it intends to replace capitalism and free enterprise with their so-called green economy or sustainable development. And then we notice a distinctly religious flavor about not only sustainable development, but climate change, global warming, stuff like that. And nobody's talking about this, Carl. My feeling is that you have something to contribute to us on this, and I want to know. My listeners want to know too. What's this religious stuff going on at the United Nations, and why should we care? You want to take a shot at that?
Oh, absolutely, Pat. You know, I'm glad you brought in the religious aspect because you're right. It seems to be underreported. And part of the reason that I believe that that's happening is because people believe that, this is just religion. And religion doesn't necessarily have a lot of bearing on what the secular world is doing and what the world of politics is engaging in. I would contend that that's the wrong approach. And I'll tell you why. Back in 2010, and I've seen this going all the way back before the turn of the millennium, in the late 1990s. But in 2010 in particular, I had the opportunity of going to the G8, G20 World Religion Summit, which took place in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. And the World Religion Summit was a parallel to the G8 political meeting, which was happening in Ontario at the time. And of course, as many of your listeners will know, when the G8 gets together, all the cameras are on the political action, and there's rioting and all kinds of things happening, and it's a big deal. But what most people don't realize is that at the same time, for a number of years already, there has been an interfaith religious component that goes along with it. And I attended that event, which got no coverage. And yet, what was interesting, Pat, was the acknowledgement that by the very fact that the religions were coming together, I'm going to put myself here in first person because I was there, we represent a larger constituency than many political, governmental environments. We have more people, let's say, under the Church of England or under the Catholic Church or who follow various strands of Hinduism or Islam than sometimes even the populations of whole countries. And so it was recognized that while the political players had tremendous clout and tremendous influence, the religious leadership of the world probably exhibits as much, if not more, but it's a quiet, soft kind of political power. And now if we could just rally up those incredible masses of people behind the religious leadership, calling for things like at the G8 World Religion Summit, world taxation, calling for harsher methods of dealing with climate change. The list went on and on. We were talking about politics, Pat, totally talking about politics and economics, but doing it from the perspective of religious constituencies.
Is this Carl, is this coming to us from a coordinated effort to co-opt the churches into supporting the globalization process, or is this just happening?
Oh, no. There is some coordinated processes behind it. There definitely is enough momentum already where church groups and religious organizations are already beginning to do these things themselves, birth their own little conferences and meetings and working groups. But with that particular event, it was coordinated, and it was coordinated through the Canadian Council of Churches, and particularly it was coordinated through 3 or 4 main individuals who are members of the World Federalist community, the World Federalist movement, which is the largest pro-world government lobby group on the planet. And they were the ones who were directly in charge of at least the event I attended in Winnipeg. And so there was this direct connection, an inescapable connection between politics and religion at the global level. Literally, global governance with religious backing 100% of the way.
2 years ago, or a year and a half ago, the United Nations, the World Council of Churches talked about green faith and how at one of the big conferences they had on interfaith conference, on how all these different religious groups got together and committed themselves to green faith. What the heck is green faith, Carl?
It's the idea that our loyalty now lies to our allegiance to the earth. It is the concept here that the earth is our mother, and this is where we now have to put our energy, our purpose, our meaning. Postmodernism is interesting. I'm just going to jump off on a quick rabbit trail here, but it's important. Postmodernism, understanding that is important, because postmodernism for the last 40, 50 years, and that's what we've in the West have been, the intellectual thinking has been, which basically says your truth is your truth, my truth is my truth. There's no authority, there's no real purpose, there's no real meaning. It's a search for new standards of truth, a rejection of the old standards, and ultimately, when it boils right down, if you just bring it right down to the most essence, the most important aspect of it, it's about asking questions and never really finding answers. Well, Pat, we have entered a different age. We're no longer really living in that postmodern question mark. We now have the answer. And I saw that answer when I was at the Global Citizenship 2000 Youth Congress, which was all about rearranging our educational priorities back in 1997 to become global citizens. And the rearrangement of our priorities is this. We now know the answers. We now know the meaning. We now know our purpose. And that is, it is about our allegiance and our loyalty to the planet, to our mother, to the goddess. It goes back to the concept of re-enchantment. It's an ancient future worldview, one that pulls from ancient pagan past, and through technology and the sciences and through our political developments today, we can reanimate that purpose and now have new life and new meaning for humanity. And that life and meaning is found in our dedication to the planet.
Is this really a resurgence of paganism and some of the ancient occultic religions that existed thousands of years ago?
I think to some extent it is. I'll tell you why. In October of 2015, I went to the Parliament of World Religions in Salt Lake City, and about 10,000 religious leaders and activists came. It was a huge event, and it was directly tied also to the politics of climate change. There were working sessions on how religious communities could now impact and influence the Paris conference that would be taking place a few weeks later. I went to a working session on the Earth Charter and how that was being used as a type of global ethic. But what really struck me, Pat, was the open, acknowledged recognition that paganism, the old classical forms of paganism, were being rebirthed and reanimated for a new era. And so we had, let's say, I'll just give you an example. We had a women's plenary event, and we also had a women's inaugural parliament, a special day just for women's issues. And so at the plenary, it started off with a song, and I'm not going to sing because I'm a lousy singer, but the song went like this. And there was a person in the front of the auditorium, and there was thousands of people. I mean, Pat, thousands of people, mostly women in the women's plenary. And she started off by singing, Goddess, Mother, Shakti of this earth, and thousands of women in unison sang back to her, Goddess, Mother, Shakti of this earth. And the entire event was built around the sense that you are a divine priestess. Mother Earth is waking up. Mother Earth is you. You are the goddess. The goddess is coming. This type of flavoring, and I mean, it was so palpable, so powerful, that when Marianne Williamson was done her keynote address, where she told us that we were all divine priestesses, the response from the crowd wasn't just clapping or a standing ovation. It was cheering, it was stomping, it was yelling, it was people beside me were crying, they were bawling, drums were going off. It was like a worship service, an unbelievable, emotionally driven worship service, recognizing that the goddess is now active and that we are taking the goddess into politics, into culture, and into society.
Wow, this is this is pretty radical.
It was. Hey, I'll tell you a little bit more, a couple other spots for the Parliament of World Religions. The goddess was so represented there that we had a hallway to the goddess. And I counted 89 mural depictions of the goddess down one of the main hallways. I went to numerous working sessions on resurrecting the goddess, bringing the goddess back. Pagan workshops. One pagan workshop, which was really interesting, was pagan response to Pope Francis's encyclical on the environment. And during that workshop, sections of Pope Francis's encyclical were read. Another section of a pagan document on sustainability was read, and the question was asked, can you tell who wrote what? No, it sounded the same. It had the same sense of purpose back to the earth, back to the planet, back to this loyalty to our mother.
Are there any particular evidences or icons at the United Nations that would tie into this type of ancient religion?
There is the spiritual prayer room that's dedicated at the United Nations, and I've been there when I was at the United Nations for the Millennium Forum back in the year 2000. I spent a little bit of time at that room just poking around and checking it out, and it definitely is a place where you can go to express your spirituality, however you want that to be. And when I was there, we did have talk about having our perspectives turned back towards the earth, the whole aspect of a planetary allegiance and loyalty. That I saw and experienced firsthand through the event. But you know something, and this is why it's important for us to actually watch and monitor what's taking place at the United Nations. Here's an example. You all know about Agenda 21. You're an expert in Agenda 21. There's a lot of people who have done some great homework on Agenda 21. There's some things that happened at the Rio Earth Summit in 1992 that definitely brings about a paganistic aspect to it. For an example, there was the NGO working group, the NGO forum that took place during the conference itself, and there was non-stop sacred fire that was lit. It was a place where you could come and express yourself regarding Mother Earth. It was a very vocally, powerfully religious example of the NGO community coming together and integrating religion and politics. But at the end of the Rio Earth Summit, at the closing hours of the event, United Nations Secretary General Boutros Boutros-Ghali said these words, and this encapsulated what happened at the Rio Earth Summit. He said this: "I should like to conclude by saying that the spirit of Rio must create a new form of good citizenship. After loving his neighbor as the Bible required him to, post-Rio man must also love the world, including the flowers, birds, and trees, every part of that natural environment that we are constantly destroying. Over and above the moral contract with God, over and above the social contract concluded with men, we must now conclude an ethical and political contract with nature, with this earth to which we owe our very existence and which gives us life." Now, Pat, here's the rest of it, and this is really important.